Hello and welcome to Restoring Our American Republic. I'm Chuck Benoit with The Nature of Things, where we are realigning God, government, and natural law so that we might restore our American Republic. Now, to those of you who have heard me rant about this in the past, please indulge me once again. You don't need to be principled in order to be a Democrat. There are no Democrat principles, just majority rules. But you do have to be principled in order to be a Republican because there are principles that determine Republicanism. And that's why there's no acrostic for Democrats in name only, but there is for Republicans in name only. They would be Republicans who are not principled Republicans. See, all true forms of government are either top down, like an oligarchy or an aristocracy, or they are bottom up, which is a republic. Today's Democrats are oligarchs. They don't determine by vote what they stand for. They are told how to vote, or they are primaried and thrown out of office if they don't vote correctly. So, what does it look like then when Republicans have to be told how to vote? Or if you don't toe the party line, you're thrown out of the Republican Party. Correct. It sounds more like top down politics and oligarchy than true Republican policy. There's a growing split in the RPUF today, but it's not so much between factions of the electorate, it's between the party itself and the electorate. The division is due to the bottom up Republican principles of government being replaced by the top down principles of the oligarch. People are being thrown out of the party because they're trying to get principled Republicans elected to office against the wishes of the left wing, top down authority of the Republican Party. Republicans, wake up. And here to help with that is our guest, Keven Wright. Keven, welcome to our podcast.
Hey, good morning, Chuck. Good morning, Mike. I'm delighted to be with you. And if in
Yeah,
any way in the next half hour I can contribute to restoring our American public, it will have been a half hour well spent.
there
I'm
you
delighted.
go.
The title alone says volumes. But I am Keven Wright. I'm a former chair of the Manatee County Republican Liberty Caucus, a former at-large director of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida, and I'm currently the Southwest director, regional director of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida, which encompasses 10 counties, three counties of which are very active and very good, and that includes Manatee, Sarasota, and Charlotte counties. So everything I have to say will be what Keven has to say, but it'll be from a Republican Liberty Caucus standpoint. And the Republican Liberty Caucus, of course, is independent, not associated, not chartered by the Republican Party. When we were founded 30 plus years ago, we decided we don't need a third party. We need to have the Republican Party be true to its constitutional roots. That was the problem. And that is the battle we continue to fight to this today. And it's all a part of restoring the American public. That's what we're all about and what we aim to do. Now, as the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida, this is a busy time for us as we get close to Christmas time, as other people are starting to relax and nestle into their cabins and their here in the winter time, get ready for Christmas and Thanksgiving. We got to get geared up. That's always true, but it's particularly true ahead of the elections in 2026 and what we do. The third week in January, the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida will do what we always do, what we call lobby days, where we spend 2 days where we have a sizable member of our active members will travel to Tallahassee and we will lobby the legislation for what is the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida priorities. And frankly, they're priorities that ought to be the priorities of the Republican Party. And since we have a supermajority in both the House and Senate in Tallahassee, you would think that these priorities would be those of those that sit in Tallahassee. That's not always the case, but nevertheless, we always try to deal with the class being half full, and we
There you
always
go.
endeavor to always persevere and
There you
make that
go.
be the case.
There you go. I
Uh,
haven't quite welcomed Mike in. Good morning, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Boy, I'll tell you one thing. This is why I love Keven Wright. You know, Keven is amazing. It's so great to have him on the show today. What I love about him is he's engaged all the time, very knowledgeable about pretty much everything that's going on in politics, highly engaged in his area and around the state, of course. And I'll be honest, I don't, with the Bob White, choosing not to be our state chairman and John Hallman, who was our legislative affairs director at the Republican Liberty Caucus, no longer in that role. The third person that I believe is well, we have a lot of great people in the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida, but Keven is certainly one of them. So I love what he had to say, and I think he just said a whole lot, Chuck. So let's see if we
There
can
you
get you
go.
to
Yeah, well,
unleash us on our talking points for today.
sure, yeah, let's get into it. So you talked about the legislative session, which is already gearing up. What are a couple of priorities of the RLC here going into this next legislative session?
Yeah, I'll talk about the priorities of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida. But clearly, as you know from watching the news, the number one priorities, as they're already meeting, the business, they're year round. Even though 40 days they do all the work that people pay attention to. But in Tallahassee, they started work, forming committees, submitting bills already. In fact, all five of the legislators from Manatee County, the two senators and two House members, have already filled up their quota of 6 bills each that they will carry the weight on. So our two priorities won't be carried by any of my 5 state legislatures in Manatee County, but we still seek to that. And it's a good feed off from your recent guest, our chair emeritus, Bob White, former chair of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida, on what our priorities are. Because the real work of lobby days doesn't start in January. If we start in January, we've started too damn late, because a lot of folks have already made up their decisions about how they're going to vote on things by then. That's just the time to bring forth the weight of our membership. But right now, what's happening across the state, and what we try to encourage Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida members in every county of Florida to do, is that there are county delegation meetings. They started last month, and they are hot and heavy this month, and they'll conclude by Halloween, the 31st of October. Here in Manatee County, on the 27th of October, we will have our county delegation. It's kind of like a town hall, where all the citizenry and the groups have their chance. They're 3 minutes at the mic, along with one-page read ahead, provided ahead of time, to say what their priorities are going into session, hoping to make those 5 state legislators make it their priorities. I go a step beyond that. This will be my 5th year speaking to the county delegation. When I first started, I also spoke to the Sarasota delegation, so I talked to a couple of overlapping folks right there too. But on the 27th, I will come in with a packet. I've already provided my read ahead. I'm already on the agenda to speak for 3 minutes. There are 5 Republican Liberty Caucus members that will be speaking on the 27th in Bradenton. And it's significant. Our state delegation is very significant for a couple of reasons. One is my state senator is Joe Gruters, who is the chairman, elected this past year, of the Republican Party, the National Republican Party. The other state senator was just elected this past week, but although he was ordained some time ago, to be the state Senate president, and extraordinarly important. So we're talking about 2 of the power brokers, both in the state and the nation, that we'll be speaking to on the 27th, along with 2 other state representatives out there, which will be huge. Some of them are outgoing, some of them are seeking re-election this next year. So that's in the back of their mind, at the forefront of their mind, and how they're going to get reelected. It always comes up front. But on the 27th, among other things that will be talked about, I've got the 2 bills that I think Bob White has introduced, because he's part of a committee that he formed advancing this, called the Come Clean Florida. The Come Clean Florida. And he spoke about this with you all last time. But the 2 bills, one of them is something that for almost since the inception 3 decades ago, the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida has been a priority. And that one is a bill to end the legal money laundering of campaign cash. Now, the state legislature took this up last session, but they evaded the most essential aspect to really come clean Florida, and that is to stop the transfer of campaign cash, excuse me, from one PAC to another. Okay, it goes from PAC to PAC to PAC, and then pretty soon you don't even know who gave what, and it flows across party lines, and across all kinds of interests, money interests, that take advantage of this, and then money transfers. For example, Senator Jim Boyd, he is going to be reelected. He's got still got to be reelected, even though he's been ordained the state senate president, and he will be. He'll be handily reelected. So, but his Friends of Jim Boyd PAC, which was formed a couple of years ago, has taken in more money than most any other state legislature has. Not because he needs it for his reelection, but because it empowers him to be able to use that money to transfer it to other PACs, to buy influence, and it empowers him to donate that money indirectly to others to get elected in the state legislature. And that way, they are beholden to him to vote as he directs them to vote. In the state of Florida, that's a problem. We don't have a freedom caucus like the United States Congress has. We don't have caucuses that operate with any power. The power is held by two people. In the state of Florida, we got a governor, and then we got a speaker of the House, and we got the state senate president. They decide who will be chairman. They will decide what committees people go to. In fact, they even get to decide whether somebody who is not, if they're not going to play along and go along, they will be relegated and given an office in the basement in Tallahassee, probably in a janitor's closet. And they certainly will not be the head of any committee, and they won't get any of the committees their choice. Like we were talking about before he came on with Mike, our case studies, we got two folks, former state representatives, Michael Beltran and Anthony Sabatini. They felt the wrath of the state speaker, and indirectly with the state senate president by not being able to do that. And so they're actually choosing to exert their power in other ways, and they're probably having greater influence now because they couldn't get it the Democratic way by having their voices heard in Tallahassee. And by the way, their voices were the voices of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida and the voices of all genuine MAGA, America First Republicans in the state of Florida. So we can't silence those voices. They need to be heard. So
Absolutely.
the 27th is very important.
Absolutely.
And we're
Mike, did you have
ahead.
something you wanted to say? Mike, did you have something you wanted to say?
Wow, Keven is just checking my boxes. You know what I mean? Because I'm totally on board with everything that. I mean, I feel like when I'm listening to Keven, it's like listening to myself because I'm 100% on board with everything that Keven is saying. But he also, that dialogue just opens up so many other conversations. Like I had something else that I wanted to kind of broach with Keven, but it's just, you have to just look at the power of incumbency, the power of the political machine, right? And then it actually goes farther because after somebody serves terms out in the House and then maybe gets elected to the Senate and terms out in the Senate, the next thing you know, they run for a local constitutional officer job. And they roll into the local political scene with $125,000 from the House PAC and $125,000 from the Senate PAC, and a local candidate who wants to be a property appraiser or clerk of the court or tax collector or supervisor of elections has no chance against that money, right? I mean, it just the magnitude of this behemoth political machine is so hard for working families and everyday citizens to overcome. So it just really makes, as Chuck pointed out earlier, it just really emboldens this autocracy. Keven, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you're right. And what we talked about, we always preach in the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida that it ought to be principle over politics, always. And sometimes that means that we run against the grain of the Republican Party. That's why we're independent of them. That's why we exist, is to stay true to constitutionally limited government, individual rights and responsibilities, and free enterprise, period. And you can disguise all kinds of things and say that it doesn't do that, doesn't. But so much of what we pass in Tallahassee, just like the United States Congress, even by Republicans, injures those three fundamental bedrock principles that we stand for. And why is that? Well, it's because really what comes before both party and politics? Money.
Exactly.
Money, unfortunately, drives the train. And when you have quasi-term limits, when it's really just setting up your next office, like we have in the state of Florida, or we have the legal laundering of campaign cash. When you have those kinds of things, what it does is that money drives the train. And why is this important? And why is the Republican Party and what happens in Tallahassee so fundamentally linked at the hip? Well, we can tell you why. Because the current chairman of the Republican Party of Florida, along with his policy director, are both lobbyists. That's what they do. They are lobbyists. That is an inherent conflict of interest. They're all about money. And if you look at the PACs and the power brokers and the money brokers that they've been dealt with, even before they assumed their current positions, that money didn't always go to Republicans. It did not. It went to a lot of others. Here's an example. The former Manatee County state president was a fellow named Bill Galvano. Bill Galvano received money from Michael Bloomberg. You wonder why we can never get real, genuine constitutional carry or constitutional rights to the Second Amendment to right of self-defense in the state of Florida? Well, that answers it why. Bloomberg gave us money, and he took that money and he distributed it to others to campaign for them and against other Republicans to be defeated in primaries. So that, and that's why they are so soft on, and why we have made the Second Amendment a second-rate civil liberty in the state of Florida.
Yeah,
We've
so
got
Keven,
so much that we need to do. We
so
talk
Keven,
the talk, but
another
we don't walk the walk on that.
another one of the bills that you wanted to talk about is I think it's talking about the use of the photographs of other people in campaign literature. Our time is flying by, and we have hardly touched on many of the things that we want to discuss. So why don't you give us a quick synopsis of that, and then we can move into our next topic.
Yeah, that's the second bill priority that Come Clean Florida and Chair Emeritus Bob White are addressing. And that's a bill to prohibit the use of an image or likeness in political advertisements and electioneering communications without the express written permission of whoever that image or likeness is. We're already seeing it for the election of 2026. They started to consider language in Tallahassee to deal with this, but that it died. It died. And you're already seeing it. People will put images of Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis, Governor Ron DeSantis on there, or whoever on a flyer, and they don't even have to say in there that I was endorsed by DeSantis or by Trump. They just imply that implicitly, and everybody knows that. That is a lie. It is a lie. That is not an exercise of First Amendment. That is a lie. And we're just saying that, hey, if you're going to suggest, and some of them go beyond that, they take it beyond just the image and likeness and say, if you're for Donald Trump or you support our governor, then you want to vote for me. That's insane. It's wrong. It's unethical. And we ought to prohibit that in the election campaign. But it's probably too late for 2026 because it's already coming out there and you're going to see more and more of it.
Yeah, so another thing we wanted to talk about was Manatee County. How did Manatee County become the epicenter of this riff with the RPOF and right-wing Republicans?
Yeah, I don't think it's any secret to anybody, although the Republican Party doesn't talk about this. Everybody knows about the legal rifts that the Republican Party of Florida has had with the Republican Assembly. My roots were that. In Georgia, I chartered a Republican Assembly. When I first arrived in Florida 8 years ago, I chartered a Republican Assembly. But I saw that in Florida that really, if we were going to meet the principles over party, the Republican Liberty Caucus was the way to go. But locally, I've championed those efforts. But so there's legal efforts. In fact, even in Sarasota this month, there will be a court case where that is being taken on. But to get more direct back to the point, the Manatee County Republican Executive Committee, which is the Republican Party of Florida, the formal, even then it was about 300 members at its highest right there. Now it's a fraction of that. Why is that? And what has changed? Well, starting about a year and a half ago, the Republican Party of Florida they totally dissolved the Republican Executive Committee in Manatee County. And they appointed a new board to include a chairman. And here is the most egregious thing that was done by the Republican Party of Florida. They also threw out the state committee man, Trent Wayman, and the state committee woman, Jacqueline Heiss. They were not elected by the Republican Executive Committee, that small group of Republicans, which is a fraction of the Republicans. The Republicans in Manatee County elected in a competitive election those two folks to be our state committee man and woman. They threw them out. How that can even be legal is certainly unethical, hands down. It is certainly disenfranchising the Republicans in this county. And there's no excuse for that. And then Heimlich and Evan Powers have lied about the conditions upon which they threw them out. They said, well, they refused to not be associated or to not be members of the RA. That's a lie. They both of them, before they even publicly said that lie about why they were thrown out, they were not members of the Republican Assembly. They made a conscious decision to dissolve their membership there because they didn't want that to get in the way of the vote. They were elected, they were thrown out. And right now, to my knowledge, unless it's changed in the last 2 weeks, the current Manatee County Republican Executive Committee, they're supposed to have 30 days to provide the supervisors' elections to their current membership. They haven't done it yet. And this is almost a year later. It's a little over 6 months later. 30 days, they haven't done that. What do you got to hide? Why don't you do what the law requires you to do? It's egregious. I cannot understand why every elected Republican at every level, local and at the state, is not screaming and hollering and saying, this is wrong. Well, I can tell you why. It's because they like the money that the Republican Party of Florida chairman brings in, because they benefit from that. And they don't want to slay that golden calf. They don't want to do that. They want to worship that golden calf of money. And so they're not going to go away from that. So they're not going to call him out and say, this is wrong. It's unethical and it ought to be illegal. It certainly is not democratic and is certainly counter to the principles that the Republican Party says it stands for.
Yeah, so in our final minutes, possibly we can discuss the chairmanship of the state Republican Liberty Caucus. There was just an election, and then the chairman managed to have to resign. And so I would ask you, what does the RLC need from its next chairman? And Mike, I'm going to throw you on the screen too, in case you have anything you'd like to share with that as well.
I'm just interested in hearing what Keven has to say. So address the question, Keven, please.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll fully answer that because as many of the listeners may or may not know, right now we've got 2 declared candidates that the board will vote on in December. And it's extremely important because that's the month ahead of our lobby days. And we have no time to waste to get some work done. So both of the candidates, and Mike particularly is reflected here on this podcast, is high energy. They have a vision, without a doubt. And Mike has shared that vision with everybody in Lottie Dottie that will ask for it. And I've certainly read it, and I read it with great care, as he knows, and we've discussed a little bit. And that is greatly appreciated. That's what we need. So yes, vision is absolutely essential. Some of the other things that may not be talked there is that we all know that Bob White, our chair emeritus, he served in this role for 10 years. One thing I think that long term, we need to have term limits on our board in the Republican Liberty Caucus. Not because Bob White didn't serve long, but because he begged for somebody else to step up and do that. Well, if we have term limits, we can free up the chair from having to beg people to fill a thing because they can be term limited. That's number one I think should happen. But one of the things that happened, there was a spate right there. You know, when we first founded, we only had 4 counties. And for a long time, for a few years, there was only 4 chartered counties that made up the Republican Caucus of Florida. And it was just our message that was carrying all the weight and the energy of the leadership that was carrying that weight. But that only carries the water so far. And then we had in about 2017, 2018, in the wake of COVID and some other things, we grew exponentially. And we went through a lot of growing pains, and I think we still are going through growing pains. I don't think we have fully come to grips with how we can function with so many people on board with 500 members, and our membership fluctuates up and down. In fact, we got to get our membership roll straight, and we got to get better. One of my number one priorities, because it's all about communication, which is why I was delighted to be on this podcast, because it's all about communication, is that we haven't seen it yet. We will. We got a promise to see that. And Dave Wallace, who was, as it turns out, was just our chair for a short thing, but he's still active. He's a friend of both of ours, as we both know. But one of the initiatives he had, and I would push for, is we've got to have a genuine, honest to God newsletter that goes out to everybody in Lottie Dottie. Not just the Liberty Caucus, there's a genuine newsletter, not just news clips about stuff that you can find anywhere, that has information that not just the Liberty Caucus of Florida members need to hear about what's going on and where we're going. Share the vision, share the short, the mid, and long-term goals, and as they evolve from month to month. A monthly newsletter, to do that, that's absolutely paramount. But it all gets back to communication, communication, communication. I don't think we've adapted very well to making our communication fill the exponential growth that we need to do, and the larger than life tasks that we have ahead of us in 2026 and beyond, and carrying the America First and Liberty Caucus legacy beyond 2028. If we don't do that, there's a lot of other folks out there. They got a lot of money, and that's the other thing. We got to get some money to get some things done too, because
We sure
we
do.
don't like the influence that money has. But guess what? Money allows you to get our fundamental core messages out there. So that's important. And I know these are things that Mike has said are important to him. And I know he wants to communicate this to folks and have it weigh in on the decisions that the board will make in December when we meet and vote in to have a new chair. I feel positive, even though we've been through some things and we've had a couple ripples. We're going to move forward. We're going to have a great lobby days. We're going to have a lead in. We're going to have a powerful chair, regardless of the outcome. We're going to move forward, and we're going to have a great year. But it's got to go beyond 2026, because it's really about setting the stage for 2028 and beyond. And Florida's got to be the lead. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So just keep in mind, Kevin, you're talking about this newsletter, which is critically important. And just remember that this live stream that we're doing right now will automatically transcribe into the written word. And then you pop a link into it on your newsletter that you email around to your constituency, and they can read it and they can watch the video if they want, right? And then the video can be edited and segmented so that people can watch whatever they want. But it's just really a matter of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida growing into this is what's going to save this country, Kevin, in my view. The access to technology is the answer, which levels the playing field with the establishment, who has millions and millions of dollars. And of course, I put into my talking points about my candidacy for the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida chairmanship, that we really need to legally empower our membership to be compensated for raising money for the party. That way, instead of us just bleeding grassroots activists dry of their time and money, they actually are remunerated for it, and it gives them another whole level of enthusiasm as they go out and spread the word of freedom, liberty, free markets, the foundational precepts of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida. Let's get Chuck back involved here.
Yeah, so we're pretty much at the end of our time, but you did mention there was a meeting on October 27th. You want to just kind of finish up with some comments on that county delegation meeting you brought up for October 27th?
Well, yeah, I addressed it earlier, and that's happening across the state. And the 27th is in particular where a whole parade of folks, and I'm one of those talking heads that will have our 3 minutes. But most of my talking will be in the handout that I provide all the state legislatures to read. That's their homework. I'm going to give them some homework to read some things. And a lot of the things we talked about, in this half hour, they are captured in the handout I will give them.